Episode number 222 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Dr. Mary Shackelton. Dr. Shackelton is the founder of Holistica Integrative Care and has been practicing naturopathic medicine with an emphasis on women's health for 25 years in Boulder, Colorado. She also has a master's in public health, which focuses much of her work in the area of prevention. Her current focus is on environmental medicine and the conditions associated with toxic exposures, including autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, cognitive decline, hormone imbalances, mitochondrial dysfunction, and neurological conditions. Her book, Preconception Cleanse, Detoxify Your Life Inside and Out for the Optimal Health of Your Baby, was written for women who are preconception to help them reduce the lifelong impact of chemical exposures, creating the foundation of healthier neurological terrain beginning in utero. Dr. Shackelton has co-founded numerous companies and projects, including Insulite Laboratories, a company dedicated to reversing disorders related to insulin, PridePads Africa, whose mission it is to provide sanitary pads to girls in Cameroon Africa to keep them in school. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Shackelton.
Thank you so much. So fun to meet you.
Yes, so fun to meet you too. So would love for you to share your background, how you got started in this field. And also we started in the pre-talk about toxicity on the fertility journey. So I would love to have you introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm a naturopathic doctor and I have been practicing in Boulder, Colorado. I run an integrative clinic called Holistica Integrative Care for 25 years. And, I started out with pediatrics as a main demographic for my practice, but then I realized, you really can't treat the kid without really treating the mom. And so then it kind of morphed into women's health. And then I realized, with some of these women, you can get their hormones right. You can do all of the things to get them balanced, and yet they still have all kinds of symptoms. And I realized the interplay between the environment and women's health, particularly as it relates to hormones. So I actually created another company regarding PCOS. And for years, I was working on getting that luteinizing hormone down. And then, fast forward 15 years, you realize, it's the endocrine disrupting hormones that are causing that. So that was kind of the genesis for the book. The second reason I wrote this book, which is called Preconception Cleanse, Detoxify Your Life Inside and Out for the Health of Your Baby, was that I've seen so many adults in their 40s and 50s with cognitive decline. Together, that if babies come in with a lower toxic load, then their cognitive journey through life is a lot less complicated in terms of ADD, autism, cognitive issues as in your 40s. It's not normal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of important. That's how I got here. Yeah.
That's what's interesting is that nobody thinks about the before, the preventative. They think about it when they actually see the symptom. Nobody thinks about it. As an acupuncturist, sometimes I have people come in when they're actually trying to conceive, and having challenges, but then every so often people are like, well, I'm not having challenges, but I just want to prepare my body. I'm like, hallelujah.
Exactly. I love that. And that's kind of why I want to reach this population, because it's not on their radar till it's on their radar.
Yeah.
And we go through life collecting everything that we're exposed to, and it does impact egg quality, sperm quality, and we can reverse it. If we know how to do it, we can do it. And I think, I'd love to see this whole category of unexplained infertility go away.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's so unexplained. I think that there is a huge correlation between the environment and both women's and men's fertility.
Yes. So let's talk about that. You were talking about endocrine disruptors, such an important topic. What are they? Explain it to the listeners.
So important. I think this might be the number one problem that we're facing. Endocrine disrupting hormones, in essence, are chemicals in the environment, plastics, fragrance, other chemicals, flame retardant chemicals, things that we don't really see or even sign up for. Those are the things that mimic hormones. They look like estrogen, for example. They sit on the receptor site of a cell and do the action of estrogen when it's really not estrogen. So you're getting all these confusing signals in your hormone messaging systems that are inappropriate. And that confuses the way your brain communicates with your ovaries. It confuses the way your ovaries mature an egg, and it confuses fertility. So the endocrine disrupting hormones, again, real simply, are plastics, especially soft plastics like plastic water bottles. And everyone, is probably familiar with the plastic in a shower curtain, but those are actually really quite dangerous as well. Fragrance. The F word, fragrance, those things are really dangerous, actually. And, I would love for women, this new generation of women, to come in to really select companies, support companies that have safe ingredients, because it's accumulating in our bodies. And so that's a big topic. And then, so I said plastics, fragrance, and then things like chemicals in our furniture and our carpet, in our cars, all those things. Some are harder to avoid than others. That's why it's important to know what is in your control and what are the things that we have to protect ourselves against.
Right. So a couple of things that I want to mention is sometimes you'll see fragrances that say they are fragrances, but they're phthalate free, because usually it's the phthalates in the fragrances. So I do want to also mention that fragrances without phthalate, still an issue.
Correct. I mean, and the history of this always goes back to some kind of legislation. In, I think it was the 60s, Coco Chanel wanted to be able to put fragrance in anything without any regulation. So they passed legislation at that time that fragrance can have up to 300 chemicals in it.
Wow.
So that's a lot. And you're inhaling it and you're absorbing it through your skin. So that's, I think we're going to look back on this time and have it be looking like, cigarettes were in the 60s and 70s. We're going to think, oh my gosh, fragrance and fertility.
And also, I mean, if you look at Europe, they ban a lot of chemicals that we don't, and the regulation is not great here. And so you really have to advocate for yourself and do the extra homework. But once you know where to look, it's much easier. And then also phthalate, I'm not phthalates, we talked about that, but BPA. So people are like, oh, I have a plastic bottle, but it's BPA free. But that's just one chemical. Plastic.
They will often replace. They'll often replace BPA with BPF, BPS, or BPA, and they're not inclined to actually advertise that. Right. So yes, a plastic water bottle, if you could get rid of that, that would be great for our planet too. These single-use plastic things just build up and they end up on our beaches, they end up in the ocean. So carrying a glass water bottle or a stainless steel water bottle, reusing it has multiple wonderful benefits.
Yeah, for sure. And I do say sometimes, I mean, for when we're traveling and there's no other choice, okay, but really for the most part, because it is hard to do everything 100%. And I always say for the most part, because also you can't avoid all of these things entirely.
Right. I also feel like women don't need one more thing to feel badly about. And right. So what I want every patient of mine to really think about is where they'll be a year from now. So not to implement everything by next Wednesday, but to really kind of give themselves a year to transition products out of their house, find new ones they love. There are so many products on the market now that are safe and decadent. We don't have to buy the garbage anymore. And one easy thing, if you're looking for products to replace, certainly look online, but health food stores have a lot of good things there. And those are generally a lot safer than what you'll find in a regular grocery store. So but yeah, to take your time and to not be hard, especially this infertility journey for women. They're already so challenged by thinking it's their fault and having a lot of guilt around that. And I don't ever want any woman to feel one more ounce of guilt, but to realize that, oh my gosh, there are things I can do. There are tests I can take to measure what I've stored. And there's a lot of empowering information out there. And I just kind of put it all in one place and hopefully, in a how-to guide for women to navigate on their own.
That's awesome. And then also, so the two parts is one, avoidance, but also another one is really encouraging detoxification, natural detoxification in the body, so that when you are exposed, because you're going to be to some extent, how does your body detoxify?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked. So, yeah, it's also not something your fertility specialist is going to ask you about, but there are 5 pathways of elimination: bowel, liver, skin, lymph, and kidney. And so, we are designed in this most beautiful way to have 5 ways to get things out. So if one is damaged or injured, the other 4 can support the elimination of toxins. So you want to make sure you're having a bowel movement at least once a day. If not, then you're reabsorbing all the things that you've metabolically eliminated already. You'll reabsorb that, and things that you're exposed to in the environment, you'll reabsorb those. We want to drink a lot of clean water, so 3 liters a day for most people. And you're drinking water, food, air, and water are the main ways we get exposed. So clean drinking water, using a filter in your kitchen or a whole house filter. And there are some that are very inexpensive that everybody can have access to. So that's a big one. Sweating is my favorite way to eliminate toxins. So if you have access to a sauna at a gym, the dry saunas are better than the wet saunas. Mm-hmm. And certainly exercise promotes sweating. So that's helpful. Any way we can sweat moves a lot of things through the skin. And that exercise also boosts lymphatic elimination of toxins. And the lymph glands, we're all familiar with the ones in our neck, but we have them all the way up our legs. We have hundreds of lymph nodes, and they're like little cleaning stations. So when your muscles contract around your lymph nodes, you're moving lymph up and out. So those are the big ones. Those are the big ones that we want to really support. And there's herbs that do these things. There's foods that do these things, but mainly sweating, exercise, drinking clean water, and having a good bowel movement every day are the places to start.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, you can also eat lots of greens and get like kind of that chlorophyll detoxification.
Correct. I mean, food is medicine.
Oh, for sure.
And I've seen so many people get well with food, and juicing is a powerful way. If you have access to a juicer, then you can concentrate some of these nutrients that drive detoxification. And so, there's a lot of myths around detoxification, and that, juicing is a good detox. Not necessarily. Water fasting is a good detox. Not necessarily.
Right.
The master cleanse.
I was going to mention that.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
No. So it's important to dispel, because we throw the word detox around often, and everybody's image of detoxification is a little different. But truly, detoxification is escorting these things out of your body, and we need nutrients to do that. So water fasting doesn't support you. So we need nutrients, especially the macronutrients like fat and protein and carbohydrates, to support detoxification in the liver. But we also need lots of high density nutrient dense foods that do that: cilantro and parsley, and all the green veggies and all the brightly colored veggies.
Right, for sure. And you can eat those naturally and still detoxify without having to go crazy and starve. And
correct.
For sure, from my perspective, when you do these really, really strong detoxes that sometimes people sell online, and, maybe at certain points in certain people's lives, it can help to some extent, but with fertility, it could be very depleting, and it can also bring out too many toxins in the body.
Right. This is one of the reasons I wrote this book, is that it was January several years ago when 3 women showed up in my office that had triggered an autoimmune crisis because they had done a group cleanse at a yoga studio. Mm-hmm. And so it's really like, not everyone has the same toxic burden, and not everyone should do the exact same cleanse. So
correct.
The goal really for me is to live a life that's detoxifying, not to do a 7-week cleanse. That doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
But to live this way. So slowly incorporating these things into your life, slowly avoiding the things that we know are triggering issues with egg quality and menstrual regularity. All of those things happen over a period of time. So I'm really hoping that women will embrace this as a year-long challenge for themselves to just start to go through their homes, their bathrooms, their kitchens, and to start eliminating the things that we've talked about and replacing it. So in the next year, your life will look different.
Amazing. And so if somebody has, say like an air filter, do you find that helps
Yes.
And there's certain ones that are better than others.
Yes, I mean there are a lot of them on the markets, but you want to get something and change the filter. That's the key. You got
Right.
to change the filter every 6 months. So if you live next to a freeway, for example, that is going to be protecting you from all of those chemicals that are coming from the roads, and they can help detoxify or help with the off-gassing of new furniture or carpet. They can help with mold exposure. Mold is a whole topic that we could talk about, but the personal air filters are really important. So if you can only afford one, I say put it in your bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Having one in your office and your bedroom would be ideal. And then there are filters that you can put into your home HVAC system that you can buy at Home Depot that help also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a MERV 11 filter. Those are available at Home Depot. So you just actually put that in your HVAC system. So a combination of these things is ideal.
Yeah. What's interesting is actually just on this topic, I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but like actually saging, people sage, and it's just something that like people do really for energy. But what's interesting about saging is that it actually eliminates a lot of the bacteria, airborne bacteria, and they actually studied it. Definitely lowers it for up to 24 hours after it's burned, which is really fascinating because you think about it as a cleansing, but it's a cleansing on multi-level. Like you can actually test the cleansing.
I love that, especially because I think everything that we need is here already.
Yeah.
So sage is one of those amazing things that, fresh herbs have so many potent chemicals in them that are beneficial to us. And so I believe it. I'm not familiar with that study, but I'm not shocked.
Yeah. I'll actually I have to remind myself to put it in the episode notes. It's definitely fascinating. And so how do you have like a certain way that you approach detoxification in order to protect? We talked about like eliminating things in our environments and also encouraging our body's natural detoxification.
Yes. And so what I think is also important is to do a kind of a family survey, family history, and to see what's happening, mothers, grandparents, siblings, children, see if there's anything running through that family, like, oh, my family were farmers and they were exposed to so much pesticides. And now everybody, under my great grandmother has had a neurologic disease. So then we know where to start, because these things you can pull out. You just need to know what. If you just want to do general stuff, then the things that we've talked about are incredibly good starting points. But then we can also take it a little bit further to look at genes. Are there certain genes that play that impair fertility? And then, the big piece for me is neurologic health of the baby, because our brain is the most sensitive organ to toxicity, and everything that the mother is exposed to, the baby's exposed to, especially before conception. So I do a lot of testing, so we can look at heavy metals, we can look at environmental pollutants, and we can look at glyphosate, which is in Roundup. Roundup is a huge chemical problem that we have, and we have to be smart. But if you avoid glyphosate, they've done studies, if you avoid it for a week, it's almost virtually eliminated from your urine. So there's a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, that's in wheat, lots of wheat products. And people, that's one of the reasons I think when people go gluten-free, they're so much better.
Absolutely. And glyphosate also destroys the microbiome. So we have a highway from our gut to our brain. And if our microbiome is deficient, then the communication to the brain is not great. And what happens in the brain is the anterior pituitary signaling menstruation, signaling follicle maturation, all of those things. So, it's glyphosate is sprayed over 80% of this planet. And in particular, they spray wheat when it's done growing so they can dry it out so that when they harvest it, it doesn't mold.
Right.
So it's a double whammy. It's all over gluten. And that might not be, going gluten-free might not be so much about avoiding gluten as it is avoiding glyphosate, because it's such a bad thing to get infected.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't think that they sprayed as much in like Europe. And a lot of people who have symptoms here, they'll go to Europe and have pasta and no problem, no bloating, no nothing.
Correct. But I do know of, women in their 35s in certain country, 35-year-old age range, cannot conceive. And so there's, I think it's real global. I think while we can eat pasta there much easier, I think the exposure to chemicals is global. And another reason that women in the United States should not take it personally and should not have guilt, like this is happening to all of us.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Also, breath work is another cleansing thing that I find to be really powerful. Just going outside, and you're in the mountains, so you have a beautiful, like, you have the best air.
Yeah, it's good, but you know what? It's not perfect here either. When I change my air filters, I'm amazed.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at what's in my filters. So, yeah, and breathwork also, I'm glad you brought that up for the emotional piece of all of this. Just, I think the more women can breathe, the more they're in tune with themselves, and that intuition is really powerful. We're so powerful, and we often are not as in alignment with ourselves as we could be if we were doing like a 5-minute meditation practice a day. That's all that you need to get started.
Oh, totally. I say the same thing. It's like just 5 minutes. Like, who doesn't have 5 minutes?
You know what Buddha said? Buddha said, if you don't
yeah.
have 20 minutes to meditate, you need 60.
I know. And it's true because I believe that it bends time. That's just the best way I could describe it, because it cuts your time in half. You're so much more focused. Your brain on meditation is just, it's clearer, it's more happy, and it can get stuff done. It's very productive. So it'll get things done in a lot faster of a time, and it's so much more efficient that it's worth taking the time out to doing that. And the thing with meditation, which is kind of it's counterintuitive. People think like you're doing nothing. It makes you feel like it's doing nothing because you're just sitting there like, what am I doing? What's the point of this? But you're doing so much. It's like sleeping. Same thing. You see somebody sleeping, it looks like they're doing nothing.
Right.
But their body's
storing
healing.
all their files in their brain. They're healing. It's so true. I mean, it is probably the most powerful 5 minutes you could have of your day. And I also tell people, including myself, I tell myself this all the time. You got to go slow to go fast. So like if you go fast all the time, you're going to be inefficient. But if you slow down,
a receding tidal wave,
right?
Go in, right?
All right. That's a good example.
Or an arrow going back to go forward.
Right.
So let's talk about how toxic exposures can impact autoimmunity, just so people can kind of get a clear picture of that. How does that impact your immune system?
Great question. Toxins have some specific targets, one the neurologic system, and one the immunologic system, and one the endocrine system. And so over time, our immune systems, it's kind of like inflammation. When you stub your toe and you got an initial swollen red toe, that's your acute response. And then over time,
which is normal.
Chronic. It's normal. And this is how our body is set up, and we're grateful for this.
Yeah.
But over time, if you keep stubbing your toe, you're going to have this chronic inflammation, and then your body loses that acute response, and it becomes chronic. So it almost kind of doesn't heal as quickly. So the same thing is true with your immune system. You have these insults, your immune system does a good job of ignoring it at first, and then it loses tolerance, and then your body starts getting confused about how to respond immunologically. And so you might start creating antibodies to your thyroid. You might start creating antibodies to your joint tissue, rheumatoid arthritis. You might start creating antibodies to skin, which would be Sjogren's or lupus. And so often when women come to see me and they say, I have a diagnosis of this, I usually say, I don't care. I don't really care what the name is. The question is, why did your body do that? That's what we have to fix. I don't want to treat your rheumatoid arthritis. That's going to go away. We're going to treat what caused that. And so we got to work upstream and dig into your life and say, what happened to you here? And where were you at this point in your life? And when did that symptom come on? And then it's really clear where we need to go from there.
Right. And you include testing to see like chemicals and pretty much what's going on in the body. Like that's when you were talking about testing the toxins.
We can test toxins that way, yes. There are urine tests. So when we urinate, we're excreting. And so what we can measure based on the lab, we can measure what's coming out. And then that tells us what you've stored and what you're exposed to currently. And then we can target specific treatments towards that. But I will tell you, the majority of detoxification protocols, even if we have that testing information, they're going to be really high in antioxidants and fiber. So the antioxidants help undo a lot of toxin exposure.
And also mitochondrial damage, which is super important for fertility.
Right. So the egg has a lot of mitochondria in it. And actually the female egg is what primes that next human's mitochondrial function to be. So we get it from the female line. So
Oh, wow.
even more important that we, the mitochondria is the engine of the cell. It produces energy. And think about any tissue that's rapidly turning over, like mucous membrane or heart tissue or brain. All of these have a really high concentration of mitochondria. And so when you get exposed to a toxin, it damages the mitochondria, and you start having brain fog, you start having gut dysfunction, you start having other things downstream.
Right. And a lot of times as we get older, sometimes it can get oxidation, which is why antioxidants are super, super important. And definitely can be, acquired in many different ways. Sometimes I see people taking tons of supplements, but if they don't address the gut, they're not able to even absorb the supplements. So it's kind of like you can't do it.
And, I always like to say that, you can't superimpose taking supplements on an unhealthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be able to get antioxidant benefit if you're exposed to cigarette smoke or tons of radiation, or, it kind of is the whole package. Our body is designed so brilliantly, but it's also very wise. And so you can't trick it by taking a bunch of vitamin C. If the rest needs to be cleaned up, you might get marginal improvement, not 100% improvement. And that's what we want.
Yeah, for sure. And what are the most common, I guess, conditions that you see of today? I mean, I know it's like the toxins, and do you tend to find a lot of autoimmune conditions that are related to fertility?
Autoimmune and neurologic. I mean, and yeah, so autoimmune for sure. In the conditions I just mentioned, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is really, really common, but I think that's an exposure issue as well. Rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of gut stuff. So ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, celiac disease is way more common now than when I started 25 years ago. So, our body is trying to give us symptoms, and it does so. It whispers at first, and then it gets louder, and then it gets louder, and then you have a really bad diagnosis. So we work back upstream to see, when did those start and how do we unravel this?
Right. And then also so much of it is connected to the gut. Lots of autoimmune conditions and leaky gut causing the inflammation in the body. And it's just a whole host. And it is really interesting because as naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, we usually focus more on the root cause than the symptom, like you were mentioning before. And there are so many pieces of the puzzle, and it's like so intertwined on all the different parts that really impact the whole.
Right. I mean, infertility is a symptom.
Yeah.
It's not a diagnosis. It's a symptom of something.
Right.
Just like rheumatoid arthritis is a symptom of inflammation. And where did that inflammation come from? That's the job. The root cause is figuring that out, which I absolutely love. I find it endlessly fascinating. I love going to work every day because the human body just never ceases to fascinate me. It's like, wow, your body did that? That's amazing.
Oh, it is so amazing. It's
amazing.
So wise. It just knows. And that's one of the things that I really stay in integrity with my practice is I'll never bypass or impose on somebody else's intuition. If somebody, even with my own knowledge and my experience, I'll never go over their intuition. If their intuition says, I don't feel right with this, or even a certain point, I always listen to it because it's, you are not the person, you're not living in their bodies. And that intuition is the body's intelligence letting you know what feels right and what doesn't. And we are like fingerprints. Each person is so unique and has different needs. It's not a cookie cutter thing.
Correct. I love that part. That makes it like really exciting to have this job for both of us. Like with acupuncture, it's the same. You're finding the obstacle and removing it.
Yeah.
In the meridians. And so it's the same. I'm doing the same thing, just finding whatever the obstacle is for that person.
Right. And also knowing that the body is a self-healing machine.
Right. You remove the obstacle. It does it.
Yep.
You stand back and watch. It's so fascinating.
It really is. And I find that it's interesting because you'll see not just through the body, not just through the symptoms resolving, but also mentally how a person feels in general, or how certain things aren't as frustrating, or they're able to get to ease more from like certain anxious experiences. And that's really rewarding, because then you see people suffering less.
Correct. Yes. We've lost our way.
Yeah.
The goal is to find our way back.
Well, interestingly enough, Chinese medicine is based on the Tao, which is called the Way. And when you're living in accordance with the Tao, which is really the way of nature, the way of the balance of yin and yang, then all will work out.
It's so true. I say the same thing. When you're living in accordance with the laws of Mother Nature, everything is in the flow. And if you go against Mother Nature, there will be a backlash. Like every chemical, there's no counterpart in nature for these chemicals. And so the backlash is what we're seeing in our health and in our children's health and in our fertility.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so as far as people wanting to work with you and reaching out, how are the different ways that you work with people, like whether it's in person or online?
I have a clinic in Boulder, so I love to see people there. And I also have an online a website where I have a course that will walk you through how to do this. I have group participations and one-on-one through my website, maryshackleton.com. So either in person or on telehealth. And then my book is also available for people that are, self-starters and want to get started and want to learn on their own. When they get stuck, then they call me.
Awesome. Well, this was such a fascinating topic and so important because, and I always compare it to like a garden. You're not just going to throw seeds randomly in some dirt that you find. You're going to take the soil and you're going to give it love and nourish it and give it nutrients and prep it. And that will give you an amazing garden. So it's very similar to the body.
It's so true. It's so true. Especially if you think about the microbiome, right? Like the terrain. So we're both addressing the terrain that yields fertility.
Without a doubt. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shackelton, welcome. For coming on today. This is a great conversation.
So great to meet you.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.